What is one country that you will never visit again? Stayoimakami said, Egypt, but more specifically Cairo. The way they treat women and their own people is honestly heartbreaking and disgusting. I have never wanted to be out of a country so fast in my life. A friend of mine was groped on the bus and a fellow student told her that is what you get for not riding the all-female bus. I never felt safe and I constantly felt sorry for almost everything I saw. The poor, the animals, the women. It honestly was devastating. Ubermagul said, Haiti. Went and did medical relief in a field hospital after the earthquake. Recent stuff aside, that country is, and has been fucked. Poor infrastructure. Poor education. No significant industries. No natural resource advantage. Corrupt government. Polarized political climate. Island nation, so all imports are more expensive. Poor medical system. Anything a country would need to get a leg up is just non-existent. I'm a pretty positive person, and met the loveliest people there, but I've never been more depressed or pessimistic about a place's future. Pirahon said, What brought you there and when did you go? I actually lived in N'Djamena for a couple years. That was late 2007 to 2009, so I got to live through the 2008 Battle of N'Djamena and subsequent evacuation. But yeah, even besides that, not a place I'd recommend. North Cameroon, however, was absolutely wonderful. The Waza National Park, the Kapsiki Mountains near Ramsaki, and the Lagdo Lake were all beautiful places. A shame that Boko Haram is now active in the area, making it far too unsafe for foreign tourists to visit. Turklik the Spartan said, Haha yay something like that. ISIS surrounded one of the main Boko Haram armies in a forest, and then pressed the attack. The BH leader was killed. The most prevalent story is that he held a grenade to himself before he got captured. But there's a solid chance that he was just killed in the fighting, or by one of his own men in an effort to move faster and escape. But yay, the ISIS in West Africa is not even close to the ISIS in Syria and Iraq. They are mainly local offshoots of BH who joined ISIS for the money, resources, equipment, and then didn't leave. The Nigerian and Niger Gov have been trying to stop them, but the results have been mixed. BH attacks the civilian groups in northern Nigeria and southwest Niger for political reasons. It's a straight-up insurgency. PMME Your Prince said, Imagine a country where 66% of the population falls below the poverty rate. Yet the country has an extremely high cost of living. It's as a desert climate with lots of mosquitoes. The money that is invested there by Russia, China, and the US just ends up going to those in power. For me, the most depressing part is that I felt helpless. That no matter what I did, it would never be enough to help. No one really cares about the country other than its strategic location for fighting terrorists and its soil. The only other reason I would never go back there is I got food poisoning twice in 2 weeks. Fatimus Maximus said, Legit one of the most beautiful and historically interesting places I've ever been. Castles and the Knights of the Round Table in Syria? I learned so much. Breaks my heart that all of these historically significant places are gone and a population is living in poverty. Heartbreaking. Jubaphob said, My dad bought one of those 1,000 places to see before you die books on a whim a few years back. I think it was published in the early 2000s and it, of course, had Damascus in it. It was absolutely heartbreaking to see what used to be and it truly saddens me that I'll probably never get to see or experience it. It's one of the oldest and most culturally rich cities in the world, and today it's just full of rubble and death. It is a sobering reminder of how volatile this world is and how quickly things can change. OK Clock 8658 said, Haiti. Went on a medical mission. One day was spent at the beach. We got caught in the middle of a protest. I was groped. Several other people were punched. It was terrifying. They only stopped when one of our translators yelled that we were medical workers. We only ended up spending 1 hour at the beach so we wouldn't end up driving back through the same area at night. When we reached that area, it was clear of people. A few overturned vehicles were on fire. A UN detail was hanging out in a big armored vehicle with a very large gun on top. I can't imagine how awful it must be now with all of the civil unrest. Alice D25 said, Also went to Haiti on a medical mission. Stayed away from PAP. Didn't see a whole lot of the country, but I will never, ever go back. Learned that the Kingston Charcoal Company had bought almost every stick of wood in the whole country to turn into charcoal briquettes. The place was a humanitarian disaster, and then it got leveled by an earthquake. Watch WHO donated supplies get sold out the back of the supply trailer. Can't fix this guy's shoulder that has been dislocated for 3 weeks because his family can't afford to buy the Valium to sedate him a little so we can put his shoulder back. It's a 2-minute procedure. Can't amputate this maggot-infested limb. Why? It's Sunday. We don't operate on Sunday. Oh, now that his leg has been amputated, he hasn't received pain medication for 3 days and wants to know why we cut his leg off. Why? His family can't afford $5 worth of Percocet. I am not cut out for disaster relief work. Clean Axe said. Egypt seems to be mentioned a bunch so far and I'd like to plus 100 that. I've traveled to over 15 countries and Egypt was the first that came to mind when I saw the title. A nice man sitting next to me on a bus to Cairo had the shit kicked out of him by police at the Suez Canal checkpoint. They literally were punching him in the face as hard as they could while he was in the chair next to me begging them to stop until they dragged him off never to be seen again probably. Like people are bashing Morocco because of beggars or annoying negotiating tactics. But in Morocco I at least never once feared for my safety or the safety of my group once while in Morocco. You can travel that country relatively freely and have a decent enough time if you go to the right spots and have a meh time if you go to the wrong ones. Egypt crosses a totally different line, especially given the fact it is still considered somewhat a tourist destination and not lumped in with Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, etc. I'd definitely say it should be widely considered and grouped closer to Afghanistan or Syria than say Israel or Turkey. The pyramids area was absolutely disgusting, so many people there to fuck you, mistreated camels, little children crawling through garbage piles. If you are a woman or have a woman in your group then holy fuck it's even worse. It is impossible to stay out past sunset as the danger and sketch levels go to 100. And I'm not just being sensitive, people assault and harass women, they'll berate you etc. I was so lucky I looked Egyptian, according to them, while I was there and it still didn't help much. Fuck Egypt man. My good friend is Egyptian, amazing history, some great people for sure, but fuck that place, and he agrees 100% especially since he's a Coptic Christian. 2 good things there. Great swimming and chilling on the Sinai, went to Bursware near Israel and it was not bad at all. Some of the museums were pretty fucking cool. Floppy Fishcake said. This makes me so sad to read. My mum has always been obsessed with Egypt, and has been there quite a few times back before I was born and a couple times when I was young. I grew up hearing stories about the pyramids and the tombs, watching documentaries and playing any game that was Egypt themed together. I always imagined one day I would be able to go there and finally be able to share in the wonders with her, but for the last few years I have heard only negative things and I fear I'll never be able to go there, especially as a single woman. Why a Reckoning Laptop said. As a guy who was born and raised in Egypt then moved to the US, I'm usually that Egyptian friend that others would rely on to navigate through the endless hassle that is Egypt. Honestly, and as much as I like my friends and would do anything to protect them, it's so fucking exhausting. The second time someone asked when will I be going back to Egypt so they can time their visit with my annual vacation I was like can you just please not go, lol. What they don't get is that it's actually quite hard to play that role if you're Egyptian too. It's not like the vendors would respect you and leave your friends alone. They would still get mad and would even direct their anger at the Egyptian in the group for not helping them make a living by fooling naive foreigners. They make like you're not loyal to your origins or something. Sometimes their first assumption is that you're some tour guide. One guy even tried to bribe me to help him sell shit to my friend. Also, sexual harassment does affect every woman in Egypt, including my Egyptian friends and relatives. The only difference is that they don't have the choice to not go back. So yay, I wouldn't want to spend my vacation fighting off street vendors too, lol. I mean if it weren't for the fact that my family still live there I wouldn't go back myself. Well maybe like every 5 years or so cause honestly the food is just freaking amazing. Genia was said. Egypt. I made the mistake of going to a store on my own, dressed in a long-sleeved dress. The owner approached me and started massaging my neck with a fragrant oil. I escaped and on the street, all men were laughing at me. Apparently I was wearing a scent that only prostitutes wear. Or so they told me. I was assaulted and ridiculed. I was staying at a 5 hotel, where a cleaner, Malay, took down my curtains. There were guys standing outside of my room after dark, waving at me and my friend, and laughing. Wanavir said, I had to wedge a chair under the door handle in Egypt as all the men that worked on the hotel would come and knock on my door at night and say creepy shit through the door. I honestly feared I was gonna be gang raped in a 5-star hotel. I wanted to go home the day I arrived. It was my single worst travel experience of my life. I've been all over Asia, South America etc, but Egypt was a fucking hellhole. Wasp vs Stripper said, true story, in college several friends went to Egypt circa 2000 while doing volunteer work throughout Africa. The work they did was with women's health issues. So very smart women and very experienced with traveling abroad in foreign countries. One of the girls was the daughter of an oil exec, and as she had been raised in UAE she spoke fluent Arabic. However, she was blonde with blue eyes, so most people wouldn't have assumed she understood Arabic. Anyhow, they are at a table and she overheard a waiter say that table was all American women. Charge them triple and try to find out what hotel they are at and spread the word. She cursed him out in Arabic. Needless to say, it super spooked the girls. They visited the pyramids, but cut their trip short and went right home after that. They got followed, goosed and pinched a lot, and one driver even tried to propose all dramatically to one of the girls. Pixel Animation said, yeah, they did this to my sister. My dad and uncle weren't overly fond, and I genuinely have never seen two brothers protect their family quite as well. The dude also took down the curtains, and so my uncle just DIY'd the duvet covers into makeshift ones. When the management got pissed, well, he won't tell us what he said, but they put the curtains back and gave us a gift card. Road Rash 010 said, I, a woman, also went Egypt with a female friend. Worst trip ever. The hotel owner spotted us as soon as we arrived and had us placed in the room next to his with a joint terrace. We kept the doors locked and curtains closed at all times. A cleaner had riffled through her bags and put our underwear and dolls he made from pillows and towels. One of the tour guides has been trying to contact me via social media for about 10 years now. That's how long ago this trip to hell was. Dude still wants to marry me according to his messages. We stuck to another couple like glue because the presence of at least one man seemed to keep some shit at bay. We also opted to wear a headscarf and avoided any clothing even slightly revealing. Almost every man I encountered in Egypt totally creeped me out, and I normally have a high tolerance for shit. Andromeda 321 said, at the rate it's going, South Africa. Backpacked around in 2009, from Cape Town to Joburg, and just loved it. Legit my favorite country I traveled in, because it is so diverse in nature, people, just about every way. But as things get more dangerous, I'm just not sure if I'll ever get back there. Seeing footage of the riots right now breaks my heart. If anyone from South Africa is reading this, BTW, I wish you all the best and hope you stay safe. Fuzzy Rose Hat said, my ex is from South Africa and they left in the early 2000s, and some of the stories he and his family told me made my normally strong stomach just hurt. His sister stayed longer than the rest of the family because it was taking forever to get her husband and son visas for the UK. Ex and the family were all dual citizens. Her literal next door neighbors were broken into and the daughter, 12, and mother were gang raped and the father forced to watch. Ex-sis-in-law and her family were on a plane the next day pretending that they were just visiting her parents, and they waited out the visa processing for husband-son while there. T3 Mpust said, I grew up and lived in RSA and was fortunate enough to immigrate to the USA. Although there is a lot to love about the country, if I never have to go back there it wouldn't bother me in the least. We still have family there, so we go back to see them. The problem is not that it's not an interesting and beautiful country. The problem is that the people that leave there have adapted to a level of crime and violence that is insane. Things like avoiding areas altogether, not walking anywhere in the evenings, trying to prevent stopping at traffic lights, robots, in the evenings, living in a secure complex, having electrified fencing and private security are all examples of everyday life in RSA. If you live overseas, chances are all of those are very foreign concepts. Edit. In South Africa, traffic lights are referred to as robots. There are not killer robots at night that prevent you stopping at a red light. Inavailable Bain said, I work with two guys from Iran. One left as a refugee when a teenager, the other grew up there, had a child there, then left. That family still go back for holidays. his wife more than him because he doesn't have enough holidays to spend as much time there as her. Obviously the one that fled has never been back. It's fascinating how different the two of them talk about their country. Timid Attack Cat said, Afghanistan. I would love to go back and be a tourist, but I don't think I will ever have the opportunity, nor would it be responsible now that I have a family to vacation there. The country is absolutely beautiful, and the weather was nice. The people are one of the kindest, most respectful cultures I have ever had the pleasure of working with, full of beautiful traditions and fantastic food. Sadly, they have their issues and it wouldn't be wise to risk going there as a tourist. A real shame too, because I'd have loved to visit the resorts in Bamyan and go skiing and snowboarding there. C-Targ said, Cambodia kinda same for me. I was mugged too, but in Colombia, which I'd probably go to again. I just found Cambodia sad and unsettling. A brutal recent history and a country that kind of has very little, so virtually all you encounter is set up to appease tourists. Drunken Europeans and Americans walking around partying with a local girl under their arm. Everywhere I went was like fighting off women trying to give you a happy ending massage. Every cabbie and tuk-tuk driver trying to sell you drugs and women. I was only there a week and didn't go too far out of Siam Reap and Phnom Penh, so certainly there's more to the country outside those cities, but the whole experience just bummed me out. Watsu221 said, I went to Cambodia with a friend 3 years ago for about a week, over which we got rifles waved in our face by border guards on the way in, on a tourist bus. Food poisoning, vomited off the side of a tuk-tuk. Food poisoning, again, or maybe drugged. Me and my bodybuilder body type buddy ended up nearly unconscious and or woozy in our hotel room for 4 hours and woke up to the sound of grisly domestic violence in the room next door. Offered child prostitutes. Nearly every tourist area that we went at night. Tour of historical sites that almost were exclusively focused on and aggressively marketing the country's very recent genocide and mass torture. Totally anecdotal, maybe a little unfair in some ways, maybe to be expected in others? Sure. But I spent a few months in the region, truly love Southeast Asia, and Vietnam is my favorite place in the world, but you could not pay me to go back to Cambodia. It's also the only place in the region where we'd walked into areas where we felt like we had to get the fuck out of ASAP. Just Want to Be Free said, I legit will never visit Egypt again. I went with my family as an 18-year-old and was warned by a stone-faced Malay receptionist, do not leave the resort without your father, it would not be good for you. Well, okay, it turns out even within the resort it wasn't great. I had hotel staff take pictures of me by the pool, saying sexually suggestive things about me in front of my parents, asking me out on dates to bars outside of the hotel. My mom and I went to a touristy shop across the road from the hotel and one of the men grabbed me by the waist and thrust his crotch into me. I have never seen my mom fight someone off before. Overall 0/10 experience. Jigamathing said, my 17-year-old sister got molested from behind by a local while going into the pyramid tomb at Giza. You have to hunch over and move single file through a narrow dark tunnel, with people in front and people behind. You can't turn around or go backwards. The man behind her escaped as soon as she got out of the tunnel, crying. My dad, who was a few people ahead of her in the single file line, could do nothing when he heard her yell out. Altam88 said, I worked there for 3 months in 2016 as a cocktail instructor and would say the same about not going back. One time I was bartending at a wedding and the operations manager came up to me and told me I had to hide while I'm making all the drinks, because if certain members of the family saw alcohol they would literally kill me. That was an intense shift. Also had shoes stolen multiple times, along with a few other things, and worst of all was seeing some of the most sickening sexism I've ever witnessed. Jahawk42 said, same here. I don't know if it's just being an American, but it was definitely a I only like you because I'm making money off you vibe. Which is sorta common in touristy areas, but it's crazy how angry they get at you when you don't use their services. Tipping was atrocious also. I'm used to tipping, but people would just come up to me to give unsolicited advice and ask for a tip. Sometimes it was cool, like a guard let me hold his AK, but other times it was just some dude that would come up and start talking to you while you were looking at a statue, and then demand a tip. One guy at the airport while I was standing in line to show my boarding pass asked what flight I was on, told me I was in the right line, and asked for a tip. Treemers said, I, female, Spent 3 weeks all over Egypt with my partner a few months ago. Dressed in baggy long sleeves and I have a boyish haircut, don't wear makeup, am above the average height of an American man. My partner, several inches taller than me and quite built. Fake wedding rings and everything. Still was groped. Still had whistles, comments yelled, comments made about me to my partner, someone asked to borrow me for the night. Strangely enough, had more issues in Cairo, Luxor, Aswan than in smaller, less touristy places like Edfu and Al-Qasir. Normally I'm fine, even in sketchy country cities, fending for myself, being big and having mastered the resting bitch face, but Egypt was a whole other level.